It is 7 o'clock. So that means it's time for us to start Model Monday here. We're broadcasting, like I said, live from my apartment because crazy things are happening in the world and cases are up and we've got mask mandate at the makerspace again. So it's easier for you guys to hear me if I can be sequestered in my apartment not wearing a mask. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to do this for January. We'll see where we end up in February, but we're going to do this for the January project. And then in February, we'll see if we can go back to in-person. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just play it by ear. Everything's fluid. You guys, we've been doing this for 18, 20 months now. You guys know what the deal is. So we're just going to get started. Part 2 of the Rainmaker project. So in part 2 of our project here, we're going to be covering these kind of tools here. So we're going to use the Extrude tool like we did last class. We're going to be making a tangent plane, which is maybe a kind of plane that people haven't made before in their own drawings, but a tangent plane will be real handy in this section of the class. We're going to be using the project tool, which is one of my favorite go-to kind of tools in Fusion 360. And then at the end of class today, we're going to be talking about maybe the difference between appearance and physical material. So we're going to be using probably appearance in general, but we'll talk about physical material a little bit and a little bit of those differences and how to utilize them. Last time we left off, that was our project here. This is where we were at. We kind of left you with the homework of adding your own little symbols around the outside. You can see I went with cherry and number 7 and $sign. My inspiration was like slot machine. You can tell I don't spend a lot of time at a casino. And the part we're adding today is the cash tray. So this is the tray that will hold the dollar bill, y'all, right in here, and then this roller will roll around real fast and shoot the money out the slot here. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this, and that way we can start from scratch. So we are going to start by making a new component. So I should note I've got, as the active component here, I've got my main document component. So you may have your roller as the active component, and we don't want to have that as our active component when we say create new component, because it'll make a new component inside of our roller component. And we don't want to do that. We want to make a new component inside of our main document component, this Rainmaker, or what mine is called Rainmaker from class. So I'm going to click the little radio button next to that. It's going to make that the active component. Gosh, should I delete this? I did a little prep earlier. I'm not going to delete it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say create. And I'm going to say new component here at the very top of the create menu. And it's going to give me my new component creation window. I'm going to call this my cash tray. No, I've already called it that. So we'll see if it's going to swear at me and let me name things the same way, or if it's just going to add a number 2 at the end of it. I'm making this inside of my Rainmaker component here, and I'm going to go ahead and have that checkbox active. That is the active option. So what it'll do is when I say OK here, it'll automatically make that, it'll make that component my active component. So if this is the first time you're working with 2 components in one document, you'll see we have some things that are changed up here. So the previous component is kind of grayed out here. It's kind of ghosted. So that is our roller that's kind of ghosted out. And that is because that is not our active component. So it's kind of hiding that. Hey, I heard a lot of background clatter. Could you guys mute if you're not muted? Beautiful. There it goes. All right, cool. All right, so now I'm going to start by, we need to create a sketch in order to create our tray here, right? So, but in order to create our sketch, we need a plane to draw that on. And I'd like to have a plane that is tangent to this surface right here. So if I kind of look at this from the side, that surface is kind of the lowered area, or it's the lowest area of my little roller grippy thing here. And then my text in those boxes and those drawings, they're what this is. They kind of stand proud of that. So I'd like my roller tray, the bottom of it, to be tangent to this cylinder here. So in our construct menu, I'm going to go ahead and find the tangent plane option. In order to draw a two-dimensional sketch, we need a plane on which to draw it on. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that tangent plane option. And now I'm going to choose a face to, if I just stop moving my mouse, it'll say, hey, select a cylindrical or conical face. So I'm going to choose this face that is kind of that lowered area, like I said, that area down here. Now, this is not the angle that I want to make this on, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on my origin here. Actually, it says negative 360, which is a weird number to start with. If I turn that down to 0, that doesn't help me at all. So if I turn on my origin over here in my browser on my left-hand side, I have an origin folder, and I can turn on that origin. And what that does is it gives me, if I zoom in here, you can kind of see these 3 axes and 3 drawing planes. Now, the 3 drawing planes are kind of like, oh, they're not. It should let me click on, yeah, it does. If I hover over these planes, it kind of highlights a slightly brighter yellow. And if I choose that, well, then I get an error. So why doesn't it like that option? So let's try something else. It wouldn't let me choose. Let's try it again. Tangent plane. I'm making a tangent to that surface right there. And the reference plane is going to be that origin. Yep, nope. Really does not like that plane, choosing that as an origin. Let's try one more thing. So if I come up to my construction menu again, and instead of a tangent plane, I'm going to choose an offset plane. Now, there it gives me these planes that are plainly viewable here. So that's a bright yellow. So I'm going to choose this surface here, and I'm going to move it just way up, just so it's clearly away from, it's distinguishable from my other 3 planes here. I'm just going to move it way up. And this plane that I'm offsetting is my kind of top plane. So here you can see in my navigation cube in the right-hand corner, I've got a top. And if I look straight down on it, that's the plane that I'm offsetting there. And again, I'm just moving it up so it's distinguishable from the other planes. And I'm going to say, OK. Now I'm going to do that tangent plane one more time. So I'm going to go construct tangent plane, and I'm going to choose the face that I want to make a tangent from. And now as the reference plane, if I choose that new plane that I just made, gosh, it really doesn't like doing that at all. Why do I have an N there? So weird. When I did this before class, I just did that and it worked just fine. So if we're going to make this plane roughly in the right spot, and it's not going to let us use a tangent plane. We're going to have to use this offset plane that we made. So this offset plane icon down in my bottom of my window here, if I right click on it and say edit feature, instead of picking an indiscriminate number there, I'm going to look at the straight right on side there, and I'm going to move this plane down until it looks like it's pretty close to tangent. And you know, this doesn't need to be an exact science here. We just need to be able to grab a hold of our dollar bills and scoot them along. So as long as we're fairly close to the tangent of this circle here, and our plane is just below our little gripping bits, which are all those parts we use the emboss tool to make, that will be just fine. More than one way to skin a cat, or make a plane in this case. And then I'm just going to say, okay, once we've got a good distance here. For me, it was 1.395. For you, it might be slightly different depending on the diameter of your roller. All right, then I'm going to say, okay. Now we have a construction plane to name. This project is all about staying organized. We're going to have lots of parts, and those parts are going to have lots of parts. So it's going to be important for us to stay on top of naming things. This is our tray surface. It's good enough. All right, now on that plane that we just made, we're going to create a sketch. So I'm going to choose from my Create menu. I'm going to come down here to the Create Sketch option. I'm going to hover over this plane that I have here. I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and then I'll spin around. So now I'm looking straight down at my roller from the top. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to bring over some geometry that I already have drawn. Namely, the sides of my roller here. I'd like to bring that geometry over to this surface so I know where the edges of my roller are. And in order to do that, I can use a tool from my Create menu. If I come down and choose to that Project Include option and scroll over to Project. It's also the P key on the keyboard. And I'm just going to choose that Project option. And now from my Project window, I have a selection type of specified entities, and that's good for me, because the specified entities that I want to highlight are this side of my roller here. And then if I move my mouse over to the other side and hover over the other side, now there's a lot of different geometry over here, so kind of be careful what you click on. We want a line that goes from the top all the way to the bottom of the roller as we see it here. So now I've got two selected objects, and I can see they're highlighted blue there as the objects that I'm projecting over, and I'm just going to say OK. Now those lines are now purple, and we can use them to reference the drawings now that we're going to be making that will represent our cache tray here. So the first thing I'm going to do is to draw a line connecting the two things together. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I'm struggling to find that project.
Ah, cool.
So it's under Create?
It's under Create, and then down to Project Include.
Why don't I have that?
Well, are you currently editing a sketch? So do you have all your sketch tools at the top?
I see. All right.
Yeah, so the first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to create a sketch on that plane that we just made. So that tray surface is what I called mine. You'll go ahead and say Create, and then you'll create a sketch, and you'll choose that as the surface that you're creating your sketch on.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. We'll take a pause here for a second and kind of let you catch up here. So what I did, once you've created that sketch and we're looking straight down at it here, is then you'll click on the Create menu. So now we're what's known as editing a sketch right now. So all the tools at the top kind of change depending on if you're in this editing a sketch mode or if you're in the solid workspace mode over here. And all the stuff in the menus are called the same thing, but they have different items within it. So if you come down to Project Include, and then the objects or the specified entities that you want to project over are the sides of your roller here. This is the advantage of attending class live, is you can ask questions. So I appreciate the question, Mike. All right, cool. So once you've got the specified entities projected over being the sides of our roller, we could say OK. And now we can continue drawing our sketch here. So what I'd like to do is have like the outer walls of our tray for our cache here. So in order to do that, I'm going to first draw a line. So I'm going to come up to my Create menu, and I'm going to grab my Line tool, and I'm going to draw a line that goes from the back points of the projected lines that I just made. So the only reason I'm doing that is because I want to be able to have a center point to draw my rectangle on here. So I'm just drawing a line across so I can have a center point to reference in my next drawing here. And because this is just a reference line, I often change these to construction lines. So if I highlight the line, I can either click on the construction button here in my sketch palette window, and that will turn it into a dashed line there, or you can hit the X key. The X key will also convert that into a construction line. So that's just a reference line, so I'm going to turn that into a construction line. And now the real reason I did that is because I'd like to draw my rectangle centered on my cache roller. So I'm going to use this center rectangle option here from the Create menu. So if I click on Create and then Rectangle, and then come over to Center Rectangle, and now if I hover over what seems to be the middle of that line, I get a little blue triangle that pops up, and that's indicating to me that that is the midpoint of that line, that construction line that we just made there. And I'm going to click one time to place that rectangle. And now if I move my mouse outward, now I can type in the dimensions of a dollar bill, which of course everybody knows is 0.621. Oh, sorry. That's wrong. That's my dyslexia kicking in there. It is 2.62 is the width of a dollar bill, and the length of a dollar bill is 6.21. I feel like I gotta measure that again because now I'm not sure, but I guess that's a number we can always change later. So I'm pretty sure that's what I remembered. All right, so we got 6.21 by 2.62. And then I'm going to hit Enter. And then we got those numbers so you can reference them if you need them. All right, so now that is the interior volume of our cache tray here. So that'll represent the inside space. But if we want to make the walls of our cache tray, we can use from the Modify menu an offset tool. Now, I suppose what you could do is you could come up to the Create menu and you could draw another center rectangle and just make it a little bit bigger. However, with the Modify menu, we can choose this offset tool. And now the sketch curves that I want to offset are that center rectangle that I just made. And now I can just specify how thick I want my walls to be. So my walls, I've been making 1/8 of an inch, because when you're American, 0.125 is a round number somehow. And we'll just choose that as the offset. And then something that you may want to be conscious of is the direction that this is going. So if I do, for me, a negative number goes in, a positive number comes out. That is not always the same. So I just take a look at your line and make sure it's moving in the right direction, as this project is in general, moving in the right direction. And then I'm going to say OK. All right, so we have got our walls here. And now I think I'm going to say finish sketch, because I think this is good for this sketch here. I was going to draw our mounting points, but I don't think we're going to do that here. So now I'm going to say finish sketch. And we've got a sketches folder now over here in our cache tray component. So I'm going to call this my tray walls, because that's what I drew on that there sketch. Now I'm going to look at this a little bit more three-dimensionally. Now imagine my cache sitting right on this. Actually, let's go ahead and extrude this out. So from my Create menu, I'm going to come over here to the Extrude option. And the object that I'm going to extrude is that space in between my initial rectangle and my offset rectangle. So just kind of that little walls there. And I'll just move this up right now. So let's explore a little bit more of this extrude window here. What I'd like to do is I'd like to extrude this in two directions. So I'm imagining my cache sitting right there, the part that's highlighted red. So we're going to need to bring our walls down below that and up above it a little bit. And of course, they don't need to be up above it that much. 1 inch is probably too much. You're probably not stacking that much cache up in the inside of it, unless you're really rolling in it here. So as the direction option, the default is set to one side. I'm going to change that to two sides. Now, up, I'm going to go just 1/2 of an inch. So that's plenty of cache for me. Actually, you know what? Let's be big spenders. I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch, just so you can have a fat roll of cache in there for shooting at your projects. And then the other direction here, I'm going to go down. I need to go down exactly 1/2 of an inch. I guess that's not true. I need to go down exactly 3/8 of an inch, which is 0.325. Is that right? 3/8 is 0.325? Yeah, that's right.
0.375.
Oh. 0.375. All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so we got down. Of course, I could let Fusion do the math for me if I really wanted to, just so you know. Oh gosh, it doesn't want to do that. Oh boy. Now I've done it. I've clicked a button and it says I don't want to extrude anymore. Two sides. I think what happened is I wasn't typing in the right distance measurement. So I want to go -3/8. Oh, that's got to be a positive number for some reason. All right, cool. And then I'm going to say OK. All right, so I've got my start of my walls are made here. So I'm going to turn off my sketches, from my tray walls sketches here, because I don't need to use that anymore. Now what I need to do is I need to have a bottom in my tray here. So if I spin around, so I'm looking at the underside of my cache tray, I can now use this surface to draw to make a sketch on. So if I come up to the Create menu and I choose Create Sketch, now the surface that I'm going to create this sketch on is the underside, the kind of bottom edge of my tray walls. And if I go ahead and click on that as an option, it's going to spin me around so I'm looking right at it. Now the bottom of my tray is going to need to not be exactly the same size as the interior walls of my tray. So I need to have like some amount of tolerance there, some amount of offset, so my tray will actually fit inside of these walls. So I'm going to make that offset by, again, using the offset tool. Suppose I should have made this one of the tools in our, one of the featured tools at the beginning of class. All right, so if I choose this offset option again here, the sketch curves that I'm going to offset are kind of that interior space there. And I'm just going to offset it a very small amount, just like 0.02 will probably be plenty. We just need to make sure it fits inside of there, right? So I'm zooming in here just so I can see that it's just offsetting in the right direction there. And again, I'm just going 0.02 inches. That will probably be just fine. And then I'm going to say OK. Now, our bottom here can't be over, has to stop at some point before it gets to our roller. And then it needs to start up again. Oh boy, it's really spinning around in circles here. It needs to start up again on the other side. So let's just worry about the back portion right now. And we'll do the front portion next. So I'm going to draw a line. And that line is going to go from one side of that offset edge that I just made all the way over to the other side of that offset edge I just made. Now, this line isn't at any particular space right now. It's not in a particular position along this distance. And I do want to give it one, but I'm not sure what that is because I need to do some experimentation here. So if I choose from my Create menu, if I choose the very bottom option, which is the Sketch Dimension option, this Sketch Dimension option is also the D key on the keyboard. D as in dog. If you choose that Sketch Dimension option, if I hover over that line I just made, and then I hover over the line here at the back that represents the back of my, the other edge of my tray here, and I click on that, now I can place this dimension. Adding this dimension will oh, you know what, I bet I did. So I inadvertently, see these little triangles here? I inadvertently added this line right at the midpoint of this other line. So it won't let me add the dimension here in between. But I can click on these constraints, these midpoint constraints here. And if I delete them, I think I got to do both of them. Now that line is blue again. And now if I come down here to this Create option and then Sketch Dimension, and now I'm going to click on the line that I just drew And then I'm going to click on the back edge of my tray. Now, there we go. Now it'll let me place that dimension. And I'm going to start with like 3.5 inches and see how that does for us. All right, so I'm going to say finish sketch now. And now I'm going to go ahead and extrude an object and extrude that back part there. So if I come up to my Create menu and come to the Extrude option, the object that I'm going to extrude, or the profile that I'm going to extrude, is that tray object there. That kind of back part of that tray that we just created this line sectioning off. I'm going to extrude it. For me, it's going to be up. So I got to go a negative. It's going to be 1/4 of an inch thick, because I'm imagining making this on the laser cutter. In fact, on my gun, I made this tray on the laser cutter. But we don't want to start it from, we don't want to start our extrusion from the profile plane. Again, we're kind of exploring all the things that this extrude menu or extrude window offers us. We want to extrude this from an offset. So I don't want to start at the profile plane. I want to start offset of my profile plane -1/8 of an inch. So again, negative and positive numbers are always confusing in Fusion. It's starting up just a little bit. So you can see it's not starting at the bottom, at right where the drawing is. It's starting slightly above it. And it's starting above it 1/8 of an inch. And then it's going up an additional 1/4 of an inch. And that together, those measurements together, make up our 3/8 that we, remember we extruded this sidewalls in 2 directions. And we went down 3/8 of an inch, and we went up whatever amount of money you're going to stick in there. And that means that this top surface here will sit, make our cash sit nicely on top of our roller there. All right, now we're making a new body, and I'm going to say OK. All right, so I've got a sketch that I can name. This sketch is my, it's the actual tray. It's the cash tray. And the body, oh, I got 2 bodies to name. Wow, I'm way behind here. So I got my tray walls, and I also have my cash tray. All right, cool. So the next thing we want to do here is our tray is just kind of floating, which, physics doesn't allow this kind of thing to happen. We need some way to attach our cash tray to our tray walls. So let's go ahead and draw another sketch that will allow us to mount these things together. So from my Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and say Create a sketch. I'm going to create this sketch on the same surface that I created the last sketch on. And it's a trick that I do, and I didn't mention when I just did it here, is I often turn off, I hide and show my sketches a lot. So when I want to make a new sketch, but I want to use the same surface that I just created my previous sketch on, I'll often come over here and just hide that sketch that I don't want to add to. So it'd be real easy for me to say create a sketch, and then if I didn't hide this cash tray sketch that we just made, it's very easy for me to accidentally click on this cash tray sketch as opposed to clicking on the surface of the body. So I don't want to add to the cash tray sketch. I want to make a new sketch on that same surface, so I'm hiding that sketch that I don't want to add to in order to make the new one. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay, cool. All right, now on this, we can draw our mounting holes. So I'm going to go ahead and grab from my Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and grab my center diameter circle. I suppose, yeah, center diameter circle is a good one. I'm going to zoom in to the back here, and I'm just going to kind of draw, start a circle somewhere near the edge. This circle is going to be 3 millimeters because I'm going to use 3 millimeter screws to hold my tray walls to my tray bottom. So I'll just make that 3 millimeters and say enter. And now concentric on that circle, I'm going to make another circle. So I'll come up to my Create menu and I'll choose the center diameter circle option here again. Make another circle, concentric on that. The head of a 3 millimeter screw is 5 millimeters, so I'm going to make this 6 millimeters. And that way it'll be sure to fit the head in there. And then I'll say enter. Now we just need to attach this to the walls here. So I'm going to do that by adding a constraint. So first of all, I've got all these measurements here, and I'm going to just kind of pull these off to the side just so I can see these if I ever need to reference those numbers at some later point. Now, my circles are just kind of floating off in midair here. If I choose from my constraints menu the tangent constraint, I can click on my outer 6 millimeter circle as the first bit of geometry that I'm going to select, and then I can choose this line that represents the inside edge of my cache wall. And now I'm making those tangent to each other, and they just jump right on top of each other there. And now I'm just going to grab my line tool. So from the Create menu, I'll choose Line, and I'm just going to make 2 lines on either side here, connecting that. So this is going to be my little mounting position here. Now, I'm lazy. I really want to make 4 of these, but I don't want to have to draw all 4 of them. So instead of drawing all 4 of them, I'm going to draw 2 mirror lines, and I'll just mirror this shape across my mirror lines. So if I have my line tool still, and I hover over this midpoint right between the walls of my cache tray, and I draw a line straight up, some small amount there. And then over here, I'm just going to place a line here-ish. This looks like roughly in the middle-ish somewhere. And I'm going to draw this line straight up and just go ahead and straight over, I should say. So now I've got 2 lines to mirror across. And now we can use our mirror tool to create more of these circles without having to draw all that stuff. So from my Create menu, I'll scroll down to the mirror option. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to pick all 4 of those objects. And first I'm going to choose this back mirror line here, the one that goes straight vertical, and you can see it's ghosted and it appears right over on the other side. And then I'll say OK. And now I'm going to do that one more time. So from the Create menu again, I'll go grab my mirror tool. Now this time I have to select 8 objects. So it's my 2 circles on the left and 2 lines on the left, and then my 2 circles on the right and 2 lines on the right. And the mirroring line this time is this line up here that I kind of guessed at, and that's pretty close. That's pretty good. I'm going to say OK. Now, something that's kind of nice about this technique is this line being not constrained in any way. It's blue here, so this line is black. I cannot move this line because it is constrained to that midpoint here. But this line, if I'm not happy with the positioning of those other two circles, I can just move this in or out, and you can see I move those two mirrored circles in and out, so you can kind of get those in the position that you want to have them in. That looks pretty good to my eye. Close enough for government work that'll hold our tray just fine. So now I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. I'm going to spin this around so I'm looking at a little bit more three-dimensional view here. I've got a sketch to name here. So this sketch is going to be our tray mounts. And from this tray mount sketch, we can extrude a few items. So if I click on the create option and then I choose the extrude here, now I got to zoom way in because I got to highlight the 2-3 little bits here of each one of my mounts. So I'm picking that circle, that 6mm circle, and then the two kind of little connecting lines that go to the edge of our tray here. And I am going to extrude these up. So for me, that's a negative number, and it's going to be just 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. Now, I do want to make this operation a join. However, I don't want to join them to my cache tray. I just want to join these to my tray walls. So in order to make sure I join these things to the bodies that I want to join them to, I'm going to turn off my cache tray in my browser over here on the left. So just like I was hiding and showing those sketches, when I don't want to accidentally add to the sketches, if I don't want to join things to a body, I'll turn it off in my bodies folder over there. And now join is good, and I'm going to say OK. And there we go. So now I can turn off my tray mount sketches, and we've got some nice little mounts there. Let me do a little check-in. We got about 15 minutes left. How are you guys doing? Doing good? Feeling positive so far? Cool. All right, good deal. So let's keep going because we need to make the opening in our cache tray, and also we need to have a little bit of wall down here. So I'm going to use the project tool to do this again, and before we do use the project tool, we'll first need to create a sketch. I'm going to turn off that surface. So I'm going to go ahead and choose from the create menu, I'm going to choose to create a sketch, and I'm going to create this sketch on the inside of one of either the right or the left side of my tray walls here. So either this side over here or this side over here, either one is fine. I'm going to create that sketch on that inside face there. And now I'm going to kind of draw this sketch. Oh, wow, it's really jumpy. I'm going to draw this sketch slightly askew. So normally we draw sketches straight down like this. I'm going to kind of skew this off a little bit because I want to be able to see the stuff on the inside here as I'm sketching. So from the create menu, I'm going to find that project option again. So I'm going to come down to project, project include, and then project. I want to project two things. So I want to project my cylinder here. So that same kind of surface that I used that I was trying to make my tangent plane on, I'm going to project that surface. that circle. And I'm also going to project just a point being the top edge of my cache tray. So let me look at this a little bit more skewed so you can kind of see. If I take this line and project it, it just projects down to a single point there. And that'll work out just fine for us. And then I'm going to say OK. All right, now that I've got that geometry projected, now I can look at this side view again. And now I've got that little dot and that circle here. So let's make what will be the opening first. So I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm just going to draw a straight line all the way across from that projected point that I made. And this line is just going to come all the way across and just come out past the end of my tray. As long as it goes just past the end of my tray, that'll be just fine. And then I can hit the little checkbox and say OK. And now from the end point of that line, I'm going to click Create, and I'm going to make a rectangle. I'm going to make a 2-point rectangle here. And this will represent the opening of our sketch here. So I'm just making a 2-point rectangle starting at the end point of that line that I just made. And it needs to come inwards, so it'll extend out in past the inside of our tray wall. And the height should be whatever the opening you want for your cache is. So I'm going to make mine an 1/8 of an inch. I feel like that's what I did on my prototype that I made. I'm pretty sure that was an 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to say OK. And now we need to use the offset tool one more time. So we've got the opening here that we'll use to cut out the front of our sketch. Now we just need to make a wall or a floor, a tray front, I guess we could call it. So to do that, we've already got one line drawn. We can use this circle to draw the other line. So from the Modify menu, if we come down here to this Offset option, and I offset that circle that I projected over, now we just need enough of a gap here that our roller will have enough space to move around. So the edges of our roller are like right here. So I'd give it a decent amount of room to breathe. I'm going to make mine an 1/8 of an inch as well. But we just need a nice little gap here in between the edges of our roller and what will be the front walls of our sketch here. Front walls of our tray. And then I'll say OK. And then we can say Finish Sketch. All right, so now if I look at this a little bit more three-dimensionally, I got a sketch to name here. This sketch is going to be the front and opening. Even if that doesn't make sense to you, it makes a little something that makes sense. Just got to name your sketches something that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to grab from my Create menu, I'm going to choose this Extrude option. The object that I'm going to extrude is kind of this little surface in here that it made between my offset and my front walls there. So I'll kind of twist this around so you can kind of see what this is doing. Now I'm going to use this opportunity to show off one more feature in this extrude window here. Normally we specify a distance here, or we just drag this arrow, right? But in addition to the extent type of distance, you can choose an extent type of object. And if we choose that extent type of object, and now we spin around so we can see the other inside wall. So that's the inside wall I made my sketch on. If I click on this inside wall over here, then it'll go ahead and extrude that off exactly that distance. and it will go ahead and join it to it, which is just fine. And then I'll say OK. The advantage of this is now, if I were to change my tray walls here, where I made my tray walls sketch, if I were to change the width of this, that extrusion will always go and meet this surface. So it's kind of nice to be able to build that in there. All right, now the penultimate thing we need to do here is to make the opening in our cache front here. So if I go ahead and grab my extrude tool one more time, it's probably not going to let me pick both parts of my sketch at once, because part of my sketch is on the other side of this 3D object. So what I may have to do is turn off my bodies, and then I can select both parts of my sketch. So this part of my sketch existed on the other side of a body, so it wouldn't let me pick it. I suppose I could rotate my view and then it lets me pick it, but sometimes you need to toggle your body's visibility on and off. And now, same thing, I'm going to change my extent type from distance to object, and then I'm going to specify that opposite wall. And here this time I am indeed cutting, and I could say OK. All right, cool. So I can turn off that sketch. So this is where we're at so far. Oh, you know what? Let's do one more thing, because we're not going to be able to. We need some holes in our tray here, right? So we can go ahead and from that. Let's see. It was the tray mounts sketch here. If I turn that tray mounts sketch on, the thing that I want to do is extrude out some holes here. So if I go ahead and grab my extrude tool and I choose each one of my 4 3mm holes, and I twist this around so I can look at the top here, and I move these up. So we're kind of poking some holes in our cache tray. Cut is indeed what we want to do. And I'm going to say OK. So now we've got some holes that we can put some screws in. And now we're good to go. All right, so now the last thing I wanted to do in these last 5 minutes is just to talk about appearance. So if I turn on the visibility, or sorry, if I make my active component my main document component again, so everything becomes not ghosted out, everything kind of looks really uniform. And sometimes, like I said, this project is all about staying organized. And visually organizing your object is just as important as naming your sketches and your construction surfaces and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to visually organize this by adding appearances. So if I come up here to the Modify menu, I can scroll down. Now there are 2 options that will do a similar thing here. So the appearance option, let's talk about that first. If I choose that appearance option, and now I scroll down in this window, I've got a whole bunch of different materials here, or appearances is a better way to say that. I've got a bunch of appearances. For example, if I spin down the plastic option, there is an option here for ABS. Now it's white, but we'll go ahead and we'll change the color on that later. So I'm going to go ahead and take this white ABS and I'm going to drag it out over my cache tray, and I'm just going to drop it right there. So now that object turns white, and up at the top of the appearance window, I've now got 2 materials that are in this design, 2 appearances that are in this design. If I double click on this ABS white, I get a little color picker here now. So this is a tool And everybody knows the appropriate color for a tool at the makerspace is approximately this color red. And I'm just going to go ahead and say done there. And now I can make that color red appear on other items in my view here. So I can either click and drag it over the object in my drawing view. But when things are kind of on top of each other, it's kind of hard to tell what you're drawing it over. So you can also drag it over the body in your bodies folder in whatever component that you want to color. So, for example, my roller, I'm pretty sure, yep, my roller is also going to be red. If I scroll down in this window, I can see that in addition to various types of plastic, I've also got transparent stuff. So I've got acrylic clear here. I mentioned, like on my tray, I laser cut this part here, this cache tray. So if I choose this acrylic clear, it'll go ahead and reflect that a little bit. The other thing that I want to color here is, I believe it's in the other option. Yeah, there is a rubber option in the other option. So I've been experimenting with overmolding. That's the other kind of main focus of this project, is doing some overmolding. So we'll cast this outer roller texture in a black rubbery material. And that, we'll talk about that in the very last class, but that gets you much closer to something that's going to look a lot more like the final product, and also a little bit more visually organized so you can tell things apart. You know, I can also do things like I can, my bearing here. So my bearing, if I choose this metal option, bearings going to be made of steel probably. And it's going to be like a satiny color. Now, that colors the entire body, that whole satiny steel color. However, the walls of my bearing are probably not going to be that satiny steel color. They're going to be like a black plastic. So if I come up here to the plastic options and in fact, you know what? Let's do this. Up here in this design section, if I right click on this ABS white that I edited and I say duplicate, now I've got a whole new kind of plastic here, and I can name this black. And I can actually make it black and then say done. And now, instead of applying this to a body or component, if I change this apply it to option at the very top of the appearance window to faces, now I can just color just that face, that black color. All right, cool. So I was careful to talk about appearances here. In later classes in this series, we will talk about physical materials. So there is a difference between appearance and physical materials. Right now, we just want to organize things by appearance, and then later we'll talk about physical materials and go down that rabbit hole a little bit. So that's it. Do you guys have questions about where we're at so far in our project? Looking good? You guys followed along all right? Thumbs up? All right, sweet.
Good.
Cool. So we'll keep going. Next week, we will be, I can make this look a little prettier. I'm trying to get better at this at this streaming thing. All right, that looks a little better. The next week we're gonna do the shell, the body of the gun. Kind of the meat of this project is gonna all be taking place in the body, the outside enclosure that encompasses this whole thing. It has like a handle down here, and it'll be cool. And we're gonna do that all with the Surface workspace. So if I come back over here to Fusion, we normally hang out in this solid workspace. Next week, we're going to delve into this Surface workspace with all these bright orange tools. It'll be fun. We'll kind of take our time a little bit because surfaces get complicated and curvy and cool and weird. But again, chime in with questions as they come up next week, and we'll see you next week, Monday. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. See you guys.
See you next time.